Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the next session of our Longevity Leaders Conference. I hope you've all had a great day so far. Really looking forward to this discussion. Just a reminder, this session is live, so please post your questions and comments for the panel in the chat. We're very keen to interact with the audience and hear what you have to say on this important topic. But without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce you to today's panel discussion, looking at how workplaces can help employees to secure lifelong financial well-being. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to your moderator, Bradley Schurman of the Super Age. Bradley, over to you.
Good afternoon to everyone in the United Kingdom, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. Good morning to those of you like me in the Americas, and good evening to all of you joining us from across Asia. And of course, hello to everyone who is watching the recording after the fact. Welcome to the Longevity Leaders World Congress and this all-important session, how workplaces can help people secure lifelong financial well-being. My name is Bradley Schurman. I'm a demographic futurist and author. My first book, The Super Age, Decoding Our Demographic Destiny, will be released in January next year. My work focuses on advising governments and businesses on their longevity strategies as they relate to human resources or people strategies, marketing and communication, as well as innovation and research and development of new products and services. You can visit us at thesuperage.com to learn more. As you all know by now, the world is becoming an increasingly older place, the product of decreasing birth rates and increasing longevity. This change has been happening quietly in the background in the advanced economies for over 200 years. However, it has sped up recently and quickly, and is spreading to developing countries as well. And it is now being recognized as a dominant force that will reshape many of our social and economic norms now and forever. If we do nothing to extend working lives, we may face labor shortages in the near future, which could drive up employee costs, which in turn could increase the price of goods, even sparking inflation. If we do nothing to support workplace savings, our coveted social welfare programs could buckle under the immense pressure of populations that are retiring or being made redundant due to old age. I'd like to thank the organizers at Longevity Leaders for pulling together this incredible panel of experts who are going to discuss two of my favorite topics, older workers and workplace savings. I'd like to introduce Ross Matthews, Director of Pensions and Benefits for Europe at Centrica, Kerry Shiels, Pensions Director at BT, Anna Dixon, Chief Executive for the Center for Aging Better, and Gail Izat, Workplace Pensions Director at Standard Life. We have about 40 to 45 minutes for this session today, and I would like to jump right in. As Angela mentioned, questions will be gathered throughout the session. I think your insights, your questions are a lot of times better than mine, so please keep those questions coming in to keep the conversation lively. However, I'd like to start with something that's very important to me, with a focus on Ross and Kerry, since my exposure to older workers and the work of Centrica and BT happened almost a decade ago while I was at AARP. Both Centrica and BT were recognized as best employers for their practices around older workers. I'm curious to get a sense from you, since obviously staying employed is part of the financial well-being picture. How do you see the work at Centrica and BT fitting into our long age future or our long life future? And could you highlight some of the top line programs that you're putting in place to encourage extended working lives? Ross, maybe we could start with you.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. So just a bit of background on Centrica for those who aren't familiar with us as an organisation. Our main market's in the UK, although we do have markets elsewhere. Our most recognised brand is British Gas, and we're the largest supplier of energy to UK households. And we're also the largest supplier of heating services through our British Gas engineer workforce. We have just under 20,000 colleagues in the UK with a diverse range of skills, etc. Some are office-based, some are field-based. And in terms of, I suppose the number one point to note is we recognise, the importance of diversity and inclusion in all our workforce. It's really important for colleagues, but also it makes for great business too. And age diversity is really important to us. And being able to extend the careers of our colleagues is factors into that. So specifically, what programs have we got ongoing at the moment to support with that? Well, first of all, flexible working. So the traditional flexible working in a post-COVID world of basically giving everyone the option to work from home whenever they like. So this takes a bit of burden off people who maybe have a lengthy, onerous commute, or would rather be at home working for certain things to fit into their work-life balance. So that's very important. Focusing on our large field force, which have around 9,000 engineers in the field, and we're also implementing some new flexible working for them. In particular, only working set days, set hours, rather than a sort of 7-day roster to fit into their needs. And also working in specific roles which potentially may be less labour intensive, so be able to extend their careers further than they might ordinarily do, so they're comfortable doing their role. And also recognising that they play a massively important role in mentoring and training the new colleagues coming into the business. So as they transition from their old traditional roles, there's still a role for them in terms of passing on that experience. Secondly, about retraining. So traditional work for our field force, to roll the clock back, may have been installing, servicing, repairing gas boilers. We're going on a programme of reskilling and retraining all our engineers to do the stuff we're going to be doing in the future for customers. This could be installing charging points for electric vehicles, or installing new heat pump technology. So all of that is where they've been doing a job for many, many years and worried about what can they do later in their career, have the opportunity to reskill, retrain, to enable them to keep their skills up for the new world. A couple of final points I'll make is as on apprentices. So we made a commitment in the out there in the public to recruit 1,000 new apprentices over the next couple of years. The headlines in the press have been around trying to aim for 50% of those to be female recruits. But just to pause and reflect on what we mean by an apprentice. Traditionally, people may think an apprentice is someone who's 18 to 21 and coming into work for the first time. But actually, an apprentice can be all ages, of course. So opportunities for older workers in the workforce to apply to become an apprentice as well. Just a final point I'll make about we have a different mixture of pension schemes in the workforce, and we allow people flexibility to access some of their pension at the same time as continuing to work. So therefore, if they want to work and reduce their hours, they can supplement their income by accessing some of their pension early. So all these things are all geared up to extend the careers of those of older colleagues, but also it provides great business benefits, so great diversity, and diversity is great for business and great customer service.
Kerry?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo absolutely a lot of what Ross has said, and there's huge synergies, I think, in that respect between the organisations. We have traditionally at BT had a very long-serving workforce. We have, up until 2018, a significant number of people in our defined benefit scheme. And that drove kind of certain policies and behaviours. I think, you know, we're now in a new world where saving for retirement, flexible working, all is sort of coming together and reshaping our thinking about how we help people get to that point of retirement, but also understanding that retirement doesn't traditionally look like it did traditionally, you know, 10 years ago perhaps. We have flexible working policies, and we've had those for a number of years. For those that don't know, British Telecom is a major provider of broadband and internet across the UK, and we've been a great supporter of home working for a number of years. It's been refined, but that does facilitate diversity and inclusion right across the piece, not just in terms of age, but obviously all those other disability, etc. as well. So we're in the process at the moment of looking particularly at financial well-being, but also at our working practices. We're also in the position of reskilling our engineers to put in fibre network as opposed to a traditional copper network. And of course, that means that we need the experience, but that's there in the business, but we need that experience to help the new guys as well. So it's a very kind of similar path and thought process, I think, to Ross described for Centrica.
Thank you for that. And obviously the Center for Aging Better is doing incredible work rethinking what the future looks like for people's working lives in particular. And I know you've done some great work around a 5-point plan and working directly with employers. BT and Centrica are often considered, top of the line employers. Maybe you could offer just a few thoughts on where other employers could improve workplace conditions for all generations, and maybe highlight how you're doing that.
Thanks very much, Bradley. Yes, so at the Centre for Aging Better, as you say, we've got a very positive vision for a society in which we all enjoy later life, and we definitely see it as an opportunity that more of us are living longer, but it obviously has profound implications for a lot of different aspects of society, and we try and use evidence to inform both policy and practice. So one of the areas we've looked at, which really relates to whether people are going to be financially secure in later life, is whether they are able to stay in fulfilling work. And we do put an emphasis on good quality work, because it does matter, not only that you have work, but obviously that work is well paid and secure and doesn't damage your health and well-being. So it's great to hear about examples, as you say. We've just heard from both BT and Centrica about the actions they're taking, and these are very much what the evidence says that all employers could and should be doing in order to be enabling people to work for longer and to build that age diverse workforce that we've heard is so important. It's important for a number of reasons to employers. There just aren't enough young workers coming into the labour market. We have this age shift already. About a third of workers are over 50, so this is already a very significant proportion of the workforce. And the fact is that we see that a diverse, including an age diverse workforce, is often more productive. So teams that have age diversity often outperform those that don't. And so there's lots of reasons why this is a good thing. But yes, we have come up with 5 simple things, and I will touch on them because I think they are highlighted already by what we've heard from BT and Centrica, but many businesses, aren't doing these things. So number 1 is flexibility. There's a bit of a confusion now that everybody thinks, oh, working from home, we've done flexibility. But, as we've heard, if you're out working in a more frontline role, a key worker, or out in the field, actually, it's a very different sorts of flexibility that you might be wanting around your role, around the time and shifts that you work. So really keen that we work with TimeWise to produce a really simple guide to help businesses think about what does flexibility mean for older workers and how to promote the uptake of it. So that's number 1. Number 2 is supporting people with health conditions and caring responsibilities. And I think we've seen how important it is to support people during COVID with caring. And certainly there are some great schemes that employers have done voluntarily to support carers leave with paid carers leave, but we would like government to go further actually and make this something that all businesses are required to do. The third is around recruitment, and this is going to become so important. We will get on, I'm sure, in the discussion, Bradley, to the impacts of the downturn in the economy on older workers. But some of those who are being laid off, if they're going to have a chance of getting back into work, or for people who are in jobs that want to progress, they need the recruitment process to be fair. And it's really important that we eliminate as far as possible age bias from the recruitment process. That can mean things around language. We've done some research recently, also imagery, but actually we want to do work with employers to actually test out all the stages of that recruitment process to look at how we can de-bias it. And so that's the third thing. The fourth is supporting career development and lifelong learning. So that reskilling, retraining we just heard about from Ross. And the fifth area is creating an age positive culture. So that's really about how do you help multi-generational workforces all to get along together, and really seeing age as part of your wider ED&I strategy in terms of what it means to be an inclusive culture at work. So those are 5 things that Aging Better is promoting. We do work with leading employers to try and showcase what they're doing and to test out, but we also want to spread this So we're really keen that more employers come forward, make these commitments, take these actions. So we have, in another 10 years, lots more examples that we can showcase alongside BT, Centrica and others.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And I think we're starting to see some of them pop up, not just in the UK, but also across Europe and into Asia and the United States and the Americas. There has been, for a period of time, because of our shifting populations and the shifting nature of the workforce, moving from a 4-generation to a 5-generation workforce, a increase in diversity. There's also been an increase in shifting responsibilities. Pensions used to be the providence of government, and now they're moving more into the private sector, and personal savings are becoming all in all more important. Gail, I was wondering if you might be able to talk to what some of the big changes have been in the UK, especially with the employers that you're working with, and which ones are really good and which ones are not meeting the mark, if I can be so bold as to ask that question.
Yeah, maybe just I'll just give a bit of context about Standard Life. So Standard Life are part of the Phoenix Group, and we're the UK's largest savings and retirement business. We've got about 14 million customers. We describe our purpose as helping people achieve a lifetime of possibilities, because we believe there's a social purpose to be fulfilled about helping people save for their future. And in our workplace business, we provide a range of pensions, but also other financial savings products and wellness products. And we work with employers to try and help people save. But if we talk about how the pension landscape has changed, then it's really been shaped by legislation, but also other changes. So in the past, you might have had a defined benefit pension. Some people are lucky enough to do that, and that would have given you a guaranteed income in retirement. But gradually that's changed, so that, and actually similar to the US model, where people are responsible for their own savings pot, and that's really transferred that risk over to the individual. Now we've had some great regulations like auto enrollment, and that's got about 10 million new people saving in workplace schemes. But we know that that actually people are probably not saving enough, and therefore may not have enough to fund their retirement. And we recently did some research with the International Longevity Centre, focusing on what we call Gen X. So that's people who are born between 1965 and 1980. And according to that report, we found that about 30% of Gen Xers were at risk of reaching retirement without having a sufficient pension. And 46% are actually contributing to these defined contribution pots, but aren't contributing enough. And I think we've got about 17% just don't know how much they're contributing. So we have people who are saving, may not be saving enough, but definitely not saving with clear goals, and really crying out for support. So that's where I think actually companies like Standard Life and workplace employers can really come together to help and work with employees to help them understand long-term saving and how to prepare for the future. And in terms of some of the techniques to do that well, obviously saving into your pension is one of the biggest things you can do to help your long-term, your long-term financial well-being. However, we need to balance that with some people's shorter-term goals. So, and we know through some of the research that people are often struggling with, how do I pay my bills? How do I buy my first house? Maybe I've got debt. How can I even start to think about saving in a pension if I can't articulate, how I'm going to solve some shorter term problems? So I think in partnership with workplace employers, it's about talking to people in a relevant way that recognises the age and stage. So you're going to talk to someone who's just in their 20s in their workplace pension in a different way than you're going to talk to someone that's in your 50s. So relevant and engaging communication is one of the key things that you can do to get it right. But then also wrapping around other sort of financial wellness sort of products that you may. So one of the things we're looking to offer to younger people is a sort of tool that might help them buy their first house. You might look at debt consolidation. You might look at financial planning. So I think wrapping some sort of wider support around, and then finally you might other sort of savings products so that people can save for those shorter term needs. So I think it's really about a holistic approach to help people focus on that longer term planning by speaking to them in a relevant way and giving them the tools and technique that help them tackle their sort of broader financial well-being.
Maybe we could dive a little bit more into the specificity of that, and maybe some other people can chime in too, because retirement's confusing. And it comes at a very a longer lead time now than it did even 20 or 30 years ago. And it certainly will be extending in the future. How do you get a young person today to say, okay, I get it, I should be putting money aside? I mean, obviously, Gail, auto enrollment is an awesome way to start. It gets people in, it kind of forces them into the system. But how do you maintain that financial education over time? I'd really like to get Ross and Kerry's perspective on this as well. But maybe, Gail, you could start with some of your insights.
Yeah, no, I think the first thing is, as I said, you've got to talk to them about some of their other needs. But, you know, auto enrollment is a start, but actually we have workplace employers who are offering some fantastic rewards. So actually I know probably Ross and Kerry where, you know, have employers where they're offering to match, you know, if an individual contributes a certain amount, then the employer will match that. And that's actually free money, you know, for younger people. But even actually getting people engaged in actually taking advantage of that needs sort of communication and regular nudging to say, do you know, if you make this contribution, it will have that impact. And what we find is that in the communication, you need to talk to them over a range of channels. So, you know, you need to be able to communicate digitally, in print, but also video. And, you know, we've recently introduced video statements, and we notice that actually on those, if there's a call to action and a nudge, then people are much more likely to take advantage of that and go in and take action. So I think it's really about that relevant communication, giving them the nudges and getting them to think about easy steps that will support that long-term planning. But both Ross and Kerry have got some great stuff going on in this space. So I guess,
yeah, Kerry, if you could speak specifically to what a nudge looks like, a successful nudge looks like, if you can do that. If I'm putting you too much on the spot, I'm sure Gail has some thinking on that from what they've seen from their clients.
If I knew absolutely what a successful nudge looked like, I'd be very, very rich. But sadly, yeah. And we have done a lot of communication engagement in the long-term savings space at BT over the last, you know, particularly the last 2-3 years, where we've had big pension scheme changes. But I think increasingly, you know, what we are realizing and understanding is that successful and sufficient long-term saving actually starts in the short term. And I don't just mean, you know, starting getting your pension contributions in from day one. I mean, talking to people about those other needs, as Gail's just said, you know, how do I save for a deposit for my first house? And of course, if you move into retirement owning a property, you actually don't need as much money in retirement because you don't have to pay rent. So it's all of those types of things that actually sort of coming to the fore. And we've realised that, you know, if we want our people to be able to afford to retire, and of course we absolutely do want that, then, you know, we need to talk to them about the things that are relevant and matter for them now. And they need to be able to see what's in the future. So even if I can't maximise my pension contributions now, I can see that that's an opportunity available for me in the future. And we've introduced a savings product called JARS, which works very kind of neatly and integrates with our pension arrangement, which you know, has been, you know, pretty popular, and that really plays to the younger audience and getting some emergency savings in place, but also allows them to sort of save for the long term as well. So there's those types of initiatives, and you know, I know that there are lots of industry initiatives in the UK to try and address this problem. I don't know if Ross wants to talk a little bit about what they're doing at Centrica.
Yeah, thanks, Kerry. So just, I suppose it's a couple of examples of Centrica just thinking about this in terms of engagement. I suppose, from my perspective, number one, whatever you're going to say, keep it simple. Use all the various channels you have. We've built our sort of one-stop shop called the My Pensions Hub. So it's accessible from any device, anytime, anywhere. You know, whatever you want, one click and you're there, and you're on your personalised pension homepage, all really interactive and great. So they don't get lost at stage one, if you like. Then just a couple of things. in terms of picking up on Gail's point about, if inverted commas, free money. So we at Centrica, for the vast majority of our colleagues, double match the contributions they pay up to a certain limit. So if you use an example of, and also in the UK, you get tax savings on contributing into a pension. So one way to engage the younger workforce who aren't that familiar with pensions about the benefits of it is, for example, you pay £3.40 and £15 gets put into your pension pot. Tell me your savings account out there which gives you as good a deal as that. What's the catch? You can't touch it till you release 55. The pensions isn't as complicated as sometimes the industry makes out. In DC, it is just tax efficient, longer workplace savings. But if you get them to think about the benefits of that, even if they can't afford contributing it now, they've got that in the back of their mind. And then a point number 2, which is actually going to go live in the next month, is we're introducing a new climate aware fund, which people can choose. And as an overall ambition of Centrica as an organisation, we've got some big ambitions about supporting the move to net zero. So it's also recognise where your money's invested is becoming important to a lot of people compared to what returns you're going to get over the long term. So to try and increase engagement, get people thinking about where's your money invested in, you have the option to invest it in something which is helping the environment, which chimes into our wider sense of philosophy. So we're really interested to see what the engagement's like when we release that. So just a couple of things to try and hook people in for a sort of non-traditional method, if that makes sense.
Oh, that makes complete sense. And do you think that's something that younger generations especially are going to take up, more impact investing for their...
I think the younger generations are more conscious about the environment and are more conscious about where their money's spent. We can see that in terms of the organizations, they spend their money on and buy things from. And in terms of us as an organization, potentially the younger colleagues coming through are asking more challenging questions of us as an organization. And that comes through in terms of where we provide colleagues with vehicles, or options to vehicles. They want to have options to have an EV car rather than anything else. So there's definitely a movement in that direction, which you're probably seeing in other companies and other geographies around the world at the moment.
Right. No, that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I think we want to take one of our first questions from the audience. This one's from Andy Lee, and I think, Anna, this is a tough question. I've got to give it to you. Do we ever really address what people really need to be financially well in later life? Like, what does it look like? How is it defined? What are some of your benchmarks or ideas of where people need to be really aging well later?
Well, I think, as everybody said already, unfortunately, lots of people are undersaving, and there's a number of reasons for that. One, we underestimate how long we're going to live to start with. 2, we don't think about, therefore, sort of what are we actually going to need in terms of funding for that stage of life. There is a widespread assumption that what is an adequate income for later life assumes that you've already paid off your mortgage and that you own your house, which obviously in the future is going to not be as likely, with many more people staying in private rented throughout the whole of their life, or only having partial ownership, or still having a mortgage to pay for quite a long time. So some of those assumptions, people don't know about care costs. They don't really want to think about it. If they do think about it, they probably assume wrongly that that's covered by the state. So particularly here in the UK, there's a big debate. Obviously, the NHS, the National Health Service, is free, but social care at the moment is heavily means tested. So many people will find that they have to pay a lot out of pocket. So there's just lots of uncertainties. There's lots of ignorance. There's lots of misestimations around longevity and indeed healthy longevity. And I think all of that, together with other factors that colleagues in the pension industry here will be much better able to speak about, does lead people, unfortunately, not to be realistic about what will achieve the standard of living that they desire. And again, here in the UK, our state pension now is really just a very minimal keeping you out of poverty. It's not really what you would call adequate to support even a modest lifestyle. So we are doing work with the Pensions Policy Institute at the moment to try and come up with better definitions of what adequacy in retirement actually would look like. There's been talk as well of a living pension, similar to the living wage, trying to really define for people what is it that you would really need, and then for that to translate through into, well, what would that look like in terms of savings over the lifetime. We talked about life stages, and I do just want to underline, obviously at Centre for Aging Better, we tend to focus on people at that later life stage, approaching later life in their 50s and 60s. And we know that because of these regulatory changes in pension provision, a lot of people will have only very small, if any, defined benefits, and have still a relatively small pot, because they haven't been paying in for that long under auto enrolment, defined contribution. And so there is actually a very big financial risk coming up in the next 20 years. And those people haven't got a lot of time to play catch up. And in fact, the pensions regulations at the moment signal to them that they can start actually drawing down at 55, which obviously, if you're going to live until you're 85 or 90, is probably leaving you with a rather large gap in terms of how long you've got to make your pension last. So we're really interested in the sort of support that employers can be giving during that life stage. We've worked with some innovators, first of all, about pre-retirement courses, which are not the sort of, a week before you're out the door, let's sit you down and talk about your pension, but any time in sort of 5 years up to when you might be considering retirement and thinking about all aspects of your life. And that's also fed into work we've done around midlife MOTs. So these are at an even earlier stage, probably around 50, where it's that holistic approach, thinking about your money. And this is what I really liked about what Kerry said, in the context of your work, of your well-being, and other things that are important in your life. And I think that's really where financial well-being needs to go, sort of moving away perhaps from narrow pension advice to really being about holistic financial well-being, recognizing that in the context of your career and your health.
That's wonderful. We have another question from the audience, and I think it's an important one, even though there will be a panel discussing specifically gender pension gap later today. But obviously, men and women have different working lives still. Women are often double or triple whammied, either because they're paid less than men, they have uneven working lives, they're caregivers, or their benefits in retirement, the state pension system, are often tied to their husbands. And as I often say, husbands are the worst retirement policy. But that being said, women have some additional challenges. How are you, Gail, seeing those challenges be met from an employer's perspective in getting women to save maybe differently than men because of these challenges that they have to endure rather?
Yeah, no, thanks. It's a great question, Bradley, and I think it's a complex topic. So it's great that it's a subject of its own panel session, because I think it's at the heart. It's partly the gender pay gap that drives that. I think from a pension savings, it really starts from that. Understanding what those gaps might mean, and in terms of that sort of future long-term savings, and just getting people engaged with that. I know I had the Yes She Can initiative. I'd had some discussions with them where they were talking even about doing focus groups with women, and even just asking them who invests in the stock market. And most women, nobody put their hand up, but then saying, well, actually, who's got a pension? So actually getting people to realise that they have this asset, this pension that they're saving for, it offers a lot of opportunity. And therefore, if you had gaps in your savings, then the fact that you may want to save more to compensate for times that you've been out of the workforce. I think it's all about that sort of promoting that education and those relevant communications to that population. But it's much broader, because we need to address people's ability to have less time out of the workforce, making sure that the pay gap is addressed, and all of those factors will come together to help with addressing the gender pension gap.
That's great. And this is not to put you on the spot here, but what about some issues around race? I mean, I certainly think that that's a big issue that often goes uncovered in terms of equity in the workplace. Are there challenges? Obviously, there are challenges speaking to different generations. Are there challenges speaking to different racial populations as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about diversity, I like to think about it across all, so gender, race, neurodiversity, and those things, and that's why this topic of relevance is so important, because you need to be able to be relevant to everybody across all of those diversities. So I definitely think we see diversity is an issue in the workplace, and and Ross and Kerry will talk about it. I know in Phoenix we're passionate about creating a diverse and inclusive workforce. You need to do that, and I think we need to then also take that into how we're talking to people about financial education and ensuring that people are confident to save for the future. So and probably definitely an area that we need to do more on. I think at the moment in some of that pension savings, we're focused on probably age, stage, a little bit of gender, but there's, as we expand on relevance, I think we'll go deeper into some of these things. And we talked a little bit about some of the barriers in long-term savings are things like jargon. So, one of the things we do is we're working with behavioural psychologists to test out different type of language that may engage people, so that we can get better responses. And I think as we drive that further and further, we'll be able to cover more and more diverse topics. And it's interesting to see how powerful sometimes just the language is. And you talked about examples of nudges, but one of the areas where we'd use behavioural psychology to try and help is nominating a beneficiary for a pension. Your pension is actually it's a tax-free inheritable asset. So but actually we struggle sometimes to get people to nominate who they want that to go to. And one of the things we did through language was actually just change it. So instead of saying to someone, do you want to nominate a beneficiary for your pension? We talked about actually this is an inheritable asset. What we see other people doing is they might nominate a family member, they might nominate a friend, and actually just even that power of the crowd helped drive an increase in people doing that. So I think language, and that does come back to the diversity point. I think we need to think about relevance in a much more nuanced and granular way. And I think we're starting to make some really positive strides, but we absolutely need to make that encompass all sorts of diversity, including race, gender, neurodiversity, and other, and other segments.
No, that's really great. Thank you for sharing that. We have another question. This goes a bit more specifically into Ross about how you access individuals who are with their pensions, their public pensions, and their private savings, and how it works at Centrica in particular. This question is from Joe Phillips. How could pension design be optimized at the point where savings are accessed to enable different models in later life? So if you have people working to flexible, can they access those retirement savings?
Yes, this is a good question. So at Centrica, we've got around 40% of our active colleagues are in one of the DB schemes. The remainder are in one of the defined contribution schemes. We also have a lot of former colleagues who haven't retired who are also in one of the defined benefit schemes. For those specific schemes, in terms of the link into the state pension, we actually have implemented an option whereby they can take an initial step up in their Centrica pension, which then drops, so they get a higher amount initially. It then falls away once their state pension kicks in. So over the course of their retirements, their overall income might stay the same. So we've already thought about, they're getting their state pension in 66, 67, 68, but they want to access for their Centrica pension before that. How can they get more pension now, such a sort of level that going forward? So we sort of considered that, how it links to the state pension. We also put in place funded IFA support for those people coming up to retirement to go a face-to-face IFA, well, not face-to-face, virtual at the moment, to give them the support they need surrounding their pension options. And that could be around when they want to take their pension, what options they want to take. And they'll also discuss in terms of going through the interaction with state benefits there as well. So I'm not sure if that particularly answers the question, but that's how sort of we see Centrica linking into the some of the state benefits as well.
No, I think that's incredibly helpful because it gets us into more of the specificity. I'm going to pull us back up to big picture because we're already running short on time, and I could spend the entire day talking to the four of you about this subject because it is so wildly interesting and important for the future. But we have the future ahead of us, and obviously things are changing daily with COVID. The workforce is evolved in a way in the past year that may have taken a decade or two to encourage change. What does the future for retirement savings really look like? maybe starting with Kerry, where do you see some of the biggest pain points and where do you see some of the biggest possibilities? Anna, maybe talking to where government role fits in, and finishing with Gail on where Standard really sees the future. Kerry?
Hi. In terms of pain points, and I think Anna mentioned it earlier, just in terms of we've got a generation of people coming through who don't have DB. At the moment in the UK, we've got a lot of people retiring have got this guaranteed income from a previous employer. They might have got some defined contribution as well, but we've got coming forward this whole group of people that have got DC when DC wasn't kind of as well thought about, so it's perhaps not as adequate as it might be for later generations that are coming through. And we need to make sure people understand how much they should be saving, what they need, and what retirement might look like in that respect. So that's definitely a pain point. I think looking forward in terms of pension and long-term savings, I think it's going to be a kind of a mix of approaches and strategies to provide for your retirement in the long term. So some of that will be sort of traditional savings, some of that will be in a pension scheme, state provision, and a mix of very different things, but probably not that kind of what we've seen in the UK of a very traditional guaranteed income coming from both state and employer. And I think as employers, we've got to make sure people understand what that looks like.
So a diversity of your portfolio essentially is an underlying theme. Anna, can you tell us a bit more about where you think the government should be doing to help facilitate all of this? Because clearly the government is a key partner.
Indeed. And I think we feel that there are some questions that need revisiting about pensions. We had a very successful pension commission that set some of the long-term direction for pension reform. But, and there is a review going on of auto enrolment. But I think particularly this point that I made about the next 20 years, there's still some things that we really need to fix for people. One, is 55 too early for a drawdown? Two, are people getting the right financial advice? How can we make financial guidance and financial advice much more accessible to those even with relatively small pots? We do have in the UK a sort of pension-wise a sort of service, but it's not really accessed by enough people. And then I guess there are questions for Gail and colleagues around what financial products do we need? More simple defaults? Is the system at the moment too complex? Are we really helping people make the right choices in terms of guaranteed income that can see them right through to death, as opposed to having to manage more of the risk themselves? So I think there's a whole bunch of things, and I think probably there is enough of them that it might require, again, a sort of mini pension commission just to have a really good look at these things and to, again, settle them in a cross-party way for the long term, because that's what's so needed for pensions. It is that long-term policy making that gives both industry and consumers that sort of scope really to plan. But I think there are some things that definitely need re-looking at. And we've seen in our research, we funded the Institute for Fiscal Studies, COVID is precipitating people's economic situation to change, some for the worse, quite a few making early retirement decisions. Not all of those are going to be good decisions, and so there's quite an urgency, I think, around how we help people with financial well-being, and some of those who are really at risk, including those from Black and Asian minority backgrounds, who are often poorer in lower income work, don't own their own homes. They are some of that higher risk group of people approaching later life who are otherwise heading for financial problems, and we really need to do things to address that now.
All right, I should mention for the audience, since we do have a diverse audience here, this is certainly a UK perspective on the UK government can do, but if your government isn't talking about this now, there's a great opportunity for some advocacy in the space. Gail, I'd like to finish with you, maybe giving us some crystal ball picture of the future of private savings within the workplace and where you think the industry's going.
Listen, I guess, and just wanted to pick up also on some of the great points that the other panel members have made. Firstly, it is worth talking about COVID. So I do think COVID has exacerbated the problem. So we noticed a sort of a fivefold increase in members disclosing financial difficulty through COVID. And as Anna said, some people have, decided to take their pension early, and that may have some long-term ramifications from them. So I think, COVID has definitely highlighted that. All of the things that we talked about in the short term, I think, are important in terms of getting people more financially confident about their long-term savings is the first one, and that's through member communication and engaging them more holistically. I absolutely agree, Anna, in the simplification point. There is a range of, there's often people are baffled by choice, and there are some recent sort of changes that have come in. So things like investment pathways, I think, on drawdown products that offer people, simple choices. We've launched 4 simple choices for people, which actually now we've had those investment pathways in since auto enrollment, but we noticed they're much popular. So actually continuing to try and offer that, the guidance and simplification. Obviously, regulation in the UK changed several years ago so that advice is on a paid for basis, and that makes that sometimes out of reach for lots of people. So we definitely believe that there's more of a role for guidance. So I think you'll see guidance as opposed to advice developing, and that's definitely where we're putting a lot of investment, because we believe that people could be helped through good guidance. I think then there's room for better solutions as in retirement. We have a few now in terms of drawdown annuities, but actually I think there's probably room for product innovation. Also, some of the things, Anna, you talked about in terms of how do people fund long-term care. I know definitely we're looking at how people might be able to use the equity in their house as a product innovation that we can do in that space, to try and do that. But I think there is a little bit of a back to basics as well. There's still a lot, if we look at the financial confidence of most of the UK population is pretty low when it comes to long-term savings. So I think actually the carrying on in terms of that education, relevance and wider well-being, and actually that's where employers, they are incredibly influential in people in that pre-retirement stage. And that's why actually in our business, it's so fantastic to actually work with workplace employers. So Ross and Kerry have done some amazing innovative work in terms of how they engage their populations. And actually, we find as a workplace pension provider, actually we get new ideas, but we get that amplification through the partnership of working with employers. So it's an incredibly important partnership, but we've got lots and lots of work to do, and I think there'll be a mix of just carrying on doing the basics and pushing that, but also I think we'll see guidance and product innovation coming in the future as well.
Beautiful. Gail, Anna, Kerry, Ross, thank you so much for offering your perspectives today, your insights, and your incredibly valuable expertise. A reminder to our audience, there's opportunities to network with our speakers, with me, with others. Please take advantage of that because I know that we've barely scratched the surface in 45 minutes of conversation, and there's a lot more to learn. So thank you again to Angela, the entire team at Longevity Leaders for pulling together this conversation, and thank you to all of you for joining us. Have a good day.
I will pick up and say thanks very much, Bradley, for the wonderful effort and preparation moderating this panel. Thank you again to our panel for the wonderful insight. And of course, thanks to our audience for watching and being so interactive and really getting involved. Do stick around with us this afternoon. We have a wonderful session coming up now on the interaction between business and health and looking at leveling up health as a nation. We also have the gender pension gap panel that Bradley touched on running in an hour. I'd love to see you there if you enjoyed this particular discussion around financial well-being. But please do stay on the platform. Enjoy your afternoon. Thanks once again to our panel, and we'll see you again soon.